This is PatZi with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper Live, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And I am so honored to have as my guest today Johnnie Clark, an American hero and the author of 8 books. And I've read them all and I love them all. And I am so happy to welcome you to Joy on Paper Live. Johnnie, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, PatZi.
And of course, we're going to be talking about Guns Up. We'll talk about some of your other books too, but Guns Up, because the recent Audible version was released. I love it. It's wonderful. The narrator's great. And just, it's so exciting to see you again.
Thanks. It's great to see you. You're in Austin now.
Yeah. So I'm set up here, but it's nice that I have this YouTube channel so I'm able to see all of my favorite authors. And you are definitely one of them. I remember when you came into the studio and we started talking about Guns Up, and of course you're going to explain it, but you surprised me when you told me about the life expectancy of a gunner. And so let's just remind people about what is that, what you were told.
We didn't believe it either when we first heard it. They told us at Camp Lejeune in machine gun school that the average life expectancy of a gunner in Vietnam was 7 to 10 seconds after a firefight began. And of course, we thought it was the Marine Corps was just feeding us a line to keep us alert or something, but it ended up being true. But the machine gun is the only visible target, and most of the battles were fought at night. And every fifth round's a tracer round, so it's like a big golden arrow pointing right at the machine gun. But without that big golden arrow, we couldn't call in airstrikes. And it was up to the machine gunner to point out the enemy for the ground troops and to lay down a field of fire to smother the enemy fire. And so we had a lot of reasons we had to have tracer rounds, but
yeah,
most machine gunners.
I hope everybody noticed that you have 3 Purple Hearts, which is a little bit, you weren't happy with just one. It's a little bit overachieving when you have to get 3 of them.
A lot of other machine gunners got wounded more than once. I'm afraid it was just such a dangerous job. When I left Nam, at one point anyway, in Nam, I don't think there wasn't any machine gunners that spent their 13 months and went home. Every Marine Corps machine gunner was killed or wounded. Yeah, and every good army's taught the same thing: knock out the machine gun first. So everybody's shooting at you, and you end up catching a lot of lead.
You're going to tell us more about Guns Up and about your background. Of course, coming from West Virginia, I think you knew a little bit about shooting, but Guns Up is a very special book, and you've got so many wonderful things were said about the book when it came out. And over the years, it has become really a standard for many military people to read this book. And I just wanted to show a few of the comments that were made. I like this one from Senator James Webb when he said, brings you inside the mind and heart of a highly dedicated 18-year-old Marine serving in Vietnam's worst combat zones. That, of course, 18 years old. You joined when you were 17 years old, so this is funny, really, when you think about it, 17 years old. And, of course, Colonel Oliver North calls the book a tough, no-nonsense portrayal of combat, courage, and camaraderie. Tell us a little bit about your background and about how you wrote this book.
I'm from West Virginia originally, but I've lived in Florida most of my life. And I joined the Marine Corps at 17, but I was going to join the Marine Corps since I was 5 years old. When I was in West Virginia, I grew up. My dad was blind. He'd been in a terrible car wreck, and he lived for 7 years after the car wreck, and then he died. And we lived in basically a one-car garage we lived in some serious poverty. And then we moved from the garage to a Quonset hut. So I was always used to living in a military Quonset hut. But when I was in West Virginia, I didn't have a lot to look up to. And a lot of my family there's a lot of poverty. But my one uncle, Uncle Bobby, was a Marine. And when he would come home from the Marine Corps, he was just this solid rock that as a little boy, he'd do push-ups with me and one of my other buddies who was a fat kid. We'd sit on his back and he'd pump off push-ups. And so I grew up always wanting to be a Marine since I was about 5 years old. And so when I turned 17, I joined the Corps, but it was pretty tough on my mom. My stepdad signed for me to go in, but my poor mom, her first husband had been killed in the Battle of the Bulge, and he had three Purple Hearts. And of course, the last one was when he was killed. And so she had the guys come up to the doorstep with the telegram, wounded in action, condition unknown, and it was really tough on my mom. And the second or third time the Marines came up to the door for my mom with me, she had a breakdown. It was pretty tough on her. We talk about my three Purple Hearts, but my poor mom had six. I always look back on that and think, yeah, that if my kids were doing some of the stupid things that I did, yeah, I'd be a mess. So I wanted my son to go in the Corps, but heck, he's a fireman now, and that's almost as bad. He's a paramedic, and he's dealing with deaths all the time. Sometimes I think he's seeing more crap than I saw. And when you guys see fire trucks going by, they're not putting out fires, maybe, but they're dealing with people dying and shootings. And God, it's a rough job. The Marines aren't the only ones serving the country, but the Marines are special.
Oh, they are very special. Now, of course, one of the things is you're not the biggest guy in the world. And I remember when you came in and I was thinking of what you had to carry. Now, first of all, why do they select you to become a gunner, or do you you select that? You go in there and you say, oh, that's the job I want. Like you couldn't pick an easier one.
There's a story behind that too. At one point I was with my buddy Chan, and the book is a lot about Chan. He was Chinese American, been smuggled out of Red China, could have been a doctor, and he wanted to pay America back by going to Nam and fighting the communists. And he could have been an officer, he could have been almost anything. The guy's brilliant, and he wanted to be a Marine. He wanted to be the best. And I had an A gunner who was a freaking genius, pumping ammo around beside me. And when we were in machine gun school at Camp Lejeune, I had this brilliant idea. I wanted to go into recon, force recon. Now, force recon got to wear these little golden wings because you jumped out of planes and stuff. And force recon was a great outfit. They were an offshoot. They were the original Raiders from World War II. And that was America's first special forces. And so recon's a good outfit. But I just wanted those little golden wings because you could pick up chicks. And I knew the women would love those little wings, those little golden wings. So I told Chan, hey, we're going to go recon and get out of guns and go recon. And in the middle of the night, we had this old gunnery sergeant, master gunnery sergeant. And this guy had been in Korea. He was no kid. And he got the transfer list, guys who wanted to transfer out of guns. And so in the middle of the night, he comes out and he throws one of those old galvanized metal garbage cans. That's all we had back then. And he throws this garbage can down the center of the squad bay and starts screaming, guns up. And so everybody, all this whole barracks full of machine gunners, jump out of the racks, stand at attention at the end of the rack, and wait and think, good God, maybe we're shipping out early here. And he turns on the lights and he goes, Clark, here, take this piece of chalk and draw a line down the center of the barracks. And so I'm in my skivvies. I'm thinking, God, what in the world? So I'm drawing this line down the center of the barracks. And he goes, everybody line up, toes on that line. So we all lined up all the way down the barracks with our toes on the line. And he goes, right, I understand some of you, I thought you joined my Marine Corps to kill the enemy. And so we're going, what is this about? And then he goes, so I understand some of you have decided you don't want to kill the enemy. You just want to find the enemy and then tell the machine gunners to come in and kill them. You don't actually want to be behind the gun. You want to just go find them. And every Marine who joined my Corps to kill the enemy, stand still. And he goes, and every Marine who just wants to find them, you step over that line. That was it. I saw my little golden wings flying right out the barracks window because we couldn't step over the line. Off to Nam as machine gunners. That's how I ended up being a machine gunner.
And explain to people, you see it in the movie and it looks so easy to carry that gun around and you look really macho, but it's heavy. You were carrying how much?
The gun itself is 24.7 pounds or something like that. It's almost 25 pounds. And then you've got ammo, and you don't want to run out of ammo because where we were, if you run out of ammo, Marines are going to die. I'd carry 400 rounds of ammo, and if we knew we were going to be really in it, I might even carry 500 rounds of ammo. That's really heavy. You carry it like a Mexican bandit crisscrossing you. And so you carry all this ammo, and then we flak jacket, and then a pack with all the food you're going to be eating for the next month, and 3 or 4 canteens a lot of times because sometimes you couldn't get water, and then you a bunch of grenades, as many grenades as you could hang on you, and a cartridge belt, and every machine gunner carries a 45 caliber pistol, and had to carry a K-bar because sometimes you can't get to all those guns, and all you've got is your K. That's a knife. It's for a knife for killing. And that's a lot of weight, and a helmet, and etc. Ton of weight. And yeah, it's not for sissies, and it's not for anybody weak. And I wasn't one of the biggest. That was always, the Marine Corps always worked that way. You'd have some guy who was 6'4", he's carrying a dinky little M16, and you got somebody my size, 5'9", 5'9.5", and 160 pounds, and I'm carrying as much as I weigh. That was the Marine Corps. That's just the way it was. And you took some real pride in carrying that gun. Everybody depended on it, and it was a pretty special weapon. And I fired expert with it, and that's how I got in machine gun school. Also, I fired expert with it.
Quite remarkable. So tell us about the book, because it is a great read, and I know that it's been used in schools and classrooms. It's really set a sort of a mark in the military world. People it's really thought of as a classic in military books. So explain a little bit about your background. You mentioned West Virginia. So there you come out of West Virginia at 17. Did you think about it at the time? I'm going to Vietnam. Did you?
Oh yeah, I was a terrible student, PatZi. The idea of me writing a bestseller is, if you'd have told anybody at St. Pete High, yeah, Clark's going to write a bestseller, they'd probably cry, die, and laugh. And it's just, I was a terrible student. I would only raise my grades high enough to stay on the football team or the baseball team, whatever season it was. And at one point, I took business math, which was the easiest math you could take. Algebra sounded really hard, and I knew I better stay away from something that sounded that hard. So anything that sounded hard, I avoided like the plague, because I had to at least make like a D plus to stay on the team. My math teacher was an old guy named Chambers. He had played for the Chicago Bears. He's this great big old guy, and he was our junior varsity football coach. And he knew that the varsity only didn't have very many players. We had really very few players, but we were a really good team. We won the city and county championships, and we were ranked in the state, etc. So we had a great team, but we didn't have very many players. And so if he failed me off the team, it wasn't like I was some superstar, but I was a warm body and they needed me. So he comes to me at the end of one grading period and he goes, "Clark, I'm going to give you a D minus." And he goes, "But if we didn't need you on this team, I'd fail you right out of St. Pete High." So yeah, the idea of me being a writer, a scholar was a joke. But God has a sense of humor. And when I came back from Nam, I came back pretty angry. I got off a plane in El Toro, and I had time to rehab in hospitals in Japan and Okinawa. So I was strong again, and I was ready to fight again. But you couldn't go back to Nam until you came back to the States for at least a year if you had any serious wounds. And anyways, I was in shape, but I came home on a plane load of Marines that weren't. Some of these boys were probably going to die. And anyway, I pushed a wheelchair kid with no legs, pushed him off the big transport that we flew in on, and a bunch of nice ladies there was a red carpet, and they might have been playing the Marine Corps him for us. I forgot, but they had cookies and tea for us, welcome us home. But there was a big chain link fence right next to where we were walking down the red carpet. And it was all these war protesters, and they were throwing tomatoes and eggs at us. And they hit this kid's wheelchair. I was a pretty angry guy. I may have killed him, but I couldn't get to him because they had a platoon of military police up against the chain link fence. And it wasn't to protect them, I mean us, it was to protect them from us. We couldn't get to them, but that was only the beginning. And from there, things got ugly. I went into town. They gave me 48 hours leave, so I went in with another guy, and he was from California, and we were gonna hit a bar. We're Marines. The bar had a sign on the door that said "No Marines or dogs allowed in the bar." I got mad again, and I might have kicked a hole in the door. Anyway, then he says, "Look, this is all over LA. Let's get out of here. Let's go to my hometown here I forgot where it was in California, but so we go to the LA bus terminal. We're going to get bus tickets to his hometown and have a real home cooked meal and see his folks and just get out of LA. And while we're standing in line to get tickets, these two guys come up. They're wearing military fatigues, but they're not military. They're hippies, and they've got stuff all over it. And anyway, they came up and they said something, and I think one of them finally spit on my shoes. And so anyway, I decked him, and the other one took off running, but there were two cops, LA cops, arresting an old wino over in one corner of the bus terminal there, and so they dropped him, and they came over and arrested me, threw me in a cruiser, took my sea bag, put it in the back and in the trunk, and drove down the street. And I thought, God, I'm not even home 8 hours. I'm already going to jail. They start looking in the rearview mirror and go, "Hey, 5th Marines, huh?" As soon as they said that, I knew I was okay, because only another Marine would know that I was in the 5th Marines. We wear this pogey rope, this little red and green rope over your shoulder. And no Marine uniform, you can't have anything on a Marine uniform that isn't Marine issue, except this pogey rope, which was given to the 5th Marine Regiment after the Battle of Belleau Wood in World War I, because they saved Paris. So it was given to the 5th Marines by the French government, and Marine Corps allows the 5th Marines and the 6th Marine Regiments to wear that thing. But only another Marine would know that. And I knew right away these cops were Marines. And sure enough, pretty soon they go, "Yeah, we were with Fox 25, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." And they pull up to a curb in front of a bus stop, and they get out, take the cuffs off me, get my sea bag out of the trunk, and say, "Look, kid, welcome home. And we don't mind you knocking these guys out, but don't do it in front of cops." so this bus is going to take you back to El Toro. Get out of here. Anyway, that was the beginning of my welcome home. And then I came home, and there were a couple other episodes. I was pretty bitter. I was a pretty bitter guy. You turn on the evening news and you see these liberal liars telling the American people we're over there killing women and children. We're going, whoa, we weren't the ones doing that. They had death squads that went out and did that. And it wasn't us. I know, because I killed some of their death squads. I was on 3-man killer teams, and that was our job, was to stop the communist death squads. And their job was to go and kill a village chief or his family one at a time until the village would start giving the communists rice and supplies. This idea that Marines were over there killing women and kids, and people believed it back then. This was 1969 when I was home, and you saw it on the evening news. You believe this crap. So anyway, I was a bitter guy, and finally somebody said, "Johnny, you need to write a story. With all the stories you've got, you need to write a book and tell what the Marines were really doing in Nam." And my wife said, "Yeah, you do." About that time, I was a mailman at the time. I was working as a mailman, and I injured my back. But I had first injured my back in Nam. I kept it strong, kept off the operating table, because I was in really good shape. I trained martial arts my whole life. That's what I've done. I've taught hand-to-hand combat seminars at West Point and Annapolis, and I ran a Taekwondo and Judo school for 50 years. And so anyway, I always stayed in great shape, and it kept me off the operating table. but I had injured my back pretty bad. It kept me from fighting in the world championships back in the early 70s. But I had to jump out of a chopper. We were doing a hot LZ, and the pilot got killed. But it was one of those helicopters where the ramp goes down in the back, an old CH-46, and so all the Marines run off this little ramp when the machine gun runs off last. By the time I hit that ramp, the pilot got killed, and the chopper started whirling around all out of whack and threw me all over the inside of the chopper. And then the co-pilot got control of it and got airborne. But by that time, I got my senses back and ran to the ramp because I couldn't leave the guys without a gun. And so I jumped out. I told you how much gear I had. Yeah, I don't know the weight, but it was a ton of weight. So I hit like an anchor and screwed up my back. And so as a mailman, it took one little wrong, stupid move, and the back finally went. So I lost the job as a mailman. And now I decided I lost my job teaching martial arts at the University of South Florida at the same time. So I didn't know if that back was going to get fixed or not. And I figured I had to make a living without using my back and teaching martial arts. So I said, take a creative writing class. You got to write that book. They talked me into it. I took the same class 15 times. See, every week they would critique 10 pages of whatever you were working on. I'm writing this whole book, and I'm writing it by pencil. I didn't have a typewriter. So I wrote Guns Up by pencil. And long story short, I finally got a typewriter, and then I typed it all up because my writing instructors at St. Pete Junior College, they couldn't read my writing anymore. So I finally got a typewriter, and they thought it was the best war book they'd ever read. And so I said, great. When they start sending it out, it got rejected by every publisher from New York to California, North Carolina, you name, wherever there's a publisher, I tried, and it was going nowhere. I sent out some articles and nothing ever got published. And my wife and I started a Bible study class at Grace Bible Church here in St. Pete. And it was my pastor and a good buddy of mine. He taught the study class. And at the end of this class, they would pray for everybody's needs. And usual group, we had people fighting cancer. We had guys out of work. And I was out of work. I was working this dead-end job, an electrical job over in Tampa. And so Nancy asked for prayer for Johnny's book to get published. Nobody had read this book, PatZi. And here's all these Christians praying for my book. Every Thursday night we'd have Bible study. They'd pray for Johnny's book. And I started getting really embarrassed because, see, I wrote a nonfiction book. And I wanted to write the way the Marines talked. I didn't see how I could write nonfiction without the dialogue. So I got a lot of cuss words in this because Marines, we cuss. And we really cuss when we're angry. And sometimes even some of the lingo, there are weapons that have a 4-letter word attached to them. I had all this crap in it. And then we'd do these Bible verses and memory verses. And one was 1 Samuel 2:30. And the short version is this: I will honor those who honor me, and those who despise the Lord will be held in little esteem. But I will honor those who honor me. Everybody's got a verse that haunts them, and that one just crushed me. I couldn't get it out of my head because the book honored God because it had a Christian story to it with Chan's story and mine. But with that language in it, it didn't. So I went to my writing instructors at the college, the professors, and I said, hey, I'm going to rewrite the book. I got to take the language out of it, man. And they were totally against it. I said, oh my God, it's going to sound like Howdy Doody joins the Marine Corps. You can't do that. You'll ruin the best war book we ever read. And I said, it's going nowhere anyway. I have this conviction. I can't live with it. I got to do it this way. And so I started. I've been working on this dumb book for a lot of years, and I never wanted to read it again, but I did. I sat down because it's like reliving the war, and it's not a lot of fun sometimes. So I sat down, I started, and it took a few months, and I got all the language out and tried sending it out again with all the language out of it. Within 1 week of me, I hadn't sent anything out that quick. Within 1 week of me taking all the language out of it, I started getting phone calls from Eagle magazine, Soldier of Fortune magazine, American Legion magazine, and there was another one. And each phone call started the same way. Could I speak to Johnnie Clark? Yeah, I did. And listen, we want to buy this article you sent us. And I go, what article? I never sent you an article. What are you talking about? I said, yeah, we've got it right here. It's out of a book called Guns Up. And I said, yeah, that's my book. And I said, when did I send you that? And he said, let me look. Oh, yeah, you sent it 4 years ago. And I said, 4 years ago, and you're just now finding it? I said, yeah, it turned up in our slush pile. I can't explain it, but everybody here loves it. We want to publish it. And so we'll pay you $300 or $400. And I said, are you? Yeah, it's yours. So I published something finally. Then the next day I get a call from Eagle magazine, and it's the same story. When did I send you something? 4 years ago. And you're just now finding it? Just now finding it. 4 times this happened. And I told you, I'm no whiz kid. But if you smack me often enough, even I can see God's hand in something. And I was being honored because I chose to honor God. And within 1 month, 9 book publishers wanted Guns Up. And most of them had rejected the exact same book. But when Random House bought it, Pam Strickler calls me and she tells me, we want this book. We think it's the greatest war book we've ever read. And I said, why do you want it now? I got a rejection letter from you from 6 months ago, and you read it too, because I could tell from your letter. And I read the letter to her, and I said, this is you, right? And she goes, yeah, that's me. I did. I read it. I said, why do you want it now? Is it because I took the cuss words out? And she goes, what? She, yeah. Is that why you want it? And she goes, you mean there's no profanity in this book? And I said, nope. And she says, not one reader, not one editor, and not one senior editor at Random House Books has noticed that there's no cuss words in this book. And I said, isn't that great? I said, that's pretty cool. I said, and she goes, yeah, we want the book, but listen, Mr. Clark, nobody's going to believe a Vietnam War book without it. We're probably going to ask you to put some profanity in it. So I just laughed in her face over the phone, and I said, yeah, there's 2 chances of that happening. And I said, there's no profanity going in this book. And the rest is history. That book is, I don't know, in a 40th printing now or something. It's been in print. The average life expectancy of a paperback is 90 days, and this thing's been in print for 40 years this year.
I know.
So the book's a miracle. It's been published in Lithuania. It's required reading in the Marine Corps. It's required reading in a lot of schools that use it, and that opened up the door. I wrote 9 other books. They wanted some other books. It's all a miracle story, and this from a guy doesn't know a noun from a verb. So,
that's what's so amazing. It's such an amazing story.
God has a sense of humor.
You wrote by hand. It's just amazing. And the entire story, 40 years and still selling like crazy. And it is really a miracle. And you've been blessed by God with this. And everybody who reads it, I think, will see the same thing. There is something very special about this book. So let's take us back to Camp Lejeune. And there you are. Tell us the day you shipped out.
Oh, from Lejeune, we went to Camp Pendleton. And at Camp Pendleton, we did jungle warfare school and POW school where they
was that fun? Oh, yeah. The jungle warfare, I've spoken to quite a few F-105 pilots who had to go through the jungle warfare school.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that one? Did you like the idea of landing up with snakes and other critters?
After Paris Island, everything else was duck soup. Paris Island was a freaking nightmare. Yeah, after Paris Island, nothing seemed all that bad to me. Paris Island was a bear, man. But while I was at Camp Pendleton, before we went to Nam, they gave us another leave. Leaves were always trouble for me. So I got another leave before we were going to ship out. Chan wants to go into town and, have some fun. And I said, hey, let's go to Tijuana. So I talked him into it. And Chan's real smart. I think sometimes he went along just to keep me out of trouble, and all it did is get him in trouble. We went to Tijuana, and there was an episode. We were there with 2. we ordered drinks, and this great big Mexican bouncer comes to the table, and he's got like a tray full of drinks. I think it was like 24 drinks or something. And he puts it down. He says, and I forgot how much money he wanted for all of it. And I go, hey, time out, man. We only ordered 4 drinks. And now he doesn't speak English. Now it's, no, you pay. So I go, yeah, no, it ain't happening. We only ordered 4 drinks, and yeah, one thing led to another. So I end up hitting him, and he might have tried to hit me first. I like to say that, but I don't know. But anyway, it ended up being a big brawl in this Tijuana bar. It looked like something out of the movies, bottles flying and everything. It's pretty exciting, but I realized a guy could get hurt here. So I decided, Chan, let's get out of here, man. We're trying to crawl out. That's about when the Tijuana police showed up and nabbed us. I'm on hands and knees getting out. And everybody says, who started this? And everybody points at me. That kind of, off we go to the Tijuana brig. And then the shore patrol came and got us from the Tijuana brig. And they took us into a Navy brig in San Diego, which that was the last time I was in San Diego until this recent Jocko podcast thing that I was telling you about. It was a lot better trip this time. Then the Marine Corps took us from the Navy and threw us in a red line brig. And things got real serious in this red line brig. Yeah, you never want to go there. I don't even know if they have red line brigs now. Things have softened up. I doubt if they're allowed to hit you like they could back then. But a red line brig, there was a red line on a concrete block wall. And you had your face up against that red line, and you're at attention. And if you wanted to go to hit the head or something like that, so an MP would come by and hit you in the back of the head and drive your face into the concrete block wall. So this concrete block wall had blood all the way down this wall. And it was from all these dumb Marines like myself. But I had orders for Nam, so they had to let me go. They weren't going to let me get out of Nam just by going to the brig. I was only in there for like a day or so, I think, and then I shipped out to Nam.
Do you remember the sensation of landing in Vietnam?
Oh,
What
yeah,
was
I
that
do.
like?
It was. I just turned 18. I just had my 18th birthday almost, and I joined the Corps at 17. And yeah, I was pretty excited. I was still trying to. Do you remember Braniff Airlines? That was an old airlines. It's no longer around, but it was called Braniff Airlines, and their big old Boeings were painted neat colors. And so we flew into Hang on a Braniff airline, and it's back when all the stewardesses wore really short dresses. So the Marines were really happy until the plane landed, and then we went. That's going to be the last short dress we see in a long time. So it got serious right away. As soon as we stepped out of that plane, there were Phantom jets ripping by overhead and landing and taking off, and choppers all over the place, and we could hear outgoing artillery, and pretty quickly we figured, God, this is the real thing. Yeah, and it was pretty exciting. He marched us through in the heat. I'll never forget that, getting off an air conditioned jet and hitting the heat of Vietnam. Boy, and I'm from Florida now. I'm used to heat, but something about Vietnam heat, it was a little different. And boy, it smacked you. And then they'd marched us to this shack, and every guy's going through, and they had an old staff sergeant there, and he just raises up this stamp, this red stamp, boom, 5th Marines, boom, 5th Marines. And everybody's going to the 5th Marines. So I go, hey, Chan, hey, geez, do you think the 5th Marines needs this many new guys? What's the deal, man? And he goes, do you ever read a newspaper? I go, yeah, not really. And he goes, and he had a newspaper. He goes, here, this is called Way City. And it was a headline, Way City is going on. And the 5th Marines have taken like 150 casualties in the Battle of Way City. And so, yeah, he goes, yeah, I think they have accommodations for us. So we're heading to the 5th Marines, y'all. We're going to Way City. It got even more exciting then. Yeah, you start praying. In between the excitement and adrenaline and fear, yeah, you start getting to know the Lord again, even though you may have ignored him for the last few years. All of a sudden, kind of want to get to know him again, and that's where I was.
How long before you had your first mission?
They flew us up to Phu Bai, and that's a little north of Way City. but it's the last big American base before you get to Way. So it's, I forgot how many miles it is up Highway 1, not very many. And so at Fubai, they give you weapons and you lock and load. And at that point, I was just going to be an A gunner in a machine gun team. I didn't, so they gave me an M16 and they had a build up firing range there where you go out and you test fire your weapon. And my weapon had a broken firing pin. And all our weapons were coming out of the dead man piles. That's where guys wounded or killed, they throw all their gear in a big tent and you end up getting gear that's come off some guy who was KIA or WIA. And mine had a broken firing pin. And that'll put some doubt in your heart also. But they gave me a new one.
Definitely. I don't think I'd want a gun with a bad firing pin. That's for sure.
No, not at all. Not at all. And at Fubai, they took us to right away. We had big tents. And so we were put in 2nd Platoon, Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And they took me and Chan, I think it was just me and Chan going to the 2nd Platoon. But they threw us in this great big dust covered tent. And there was one guy in this tent way down at the end. And he's a quite big old guy, red hair, great big redheaded guy. And that it ended up being, that was Big Red. That's where I first met him. So we went down and started poking him and waking him up. And he knew right away we were boots. And so we started quizzing him and saying, hey, fill us in, man. What do we expect here? And he did. He started filling us in. And I ended up being Big Red's A gunner. And he's the one who confirmed that 7 to 10 second thing that we thought was fiction. He goes, no, man. He says, when I left, I got wounded in Way. And he said, when I left, I don't think there was a single machine gun MOS left in the regiment. And I went, oh, brother, this is really going to be exciting. So, yeah. And Red, he was a hero. He was a great hero. If anybody who reads Guns Up, you'll read about him. But he was a Marine's Marine. And his advice and his bravery kept me alive until I got my feet under me. And Chan, too. Yeah, he was something special. But he started filling us in on everything right away. We had grenades on us. They were giving us all this stuff. And we hadn't even bent the pins on the grenades. So if you walk through the jungle, this grenade doesn't have a bent pin. It catches a twig or something and pulls the pin. And you've just killed yourself and everybody around you. Stupid stuff like that. And we'd filled our magazines up with ammo because I wasn't real used to that M16. We'd actually trained with the M14. They were just, the military or the Marines were just switching over to this M16. And we called it the Matty Mattel because it was made out of plastic. And the Marines hated it. But anyway, I jammed my magazines full of 20 rounds. If you got 20 rounds in a magazine that holds 20 rounds, it weakens the spring over time. And especially when you're out in the jungle and you're sitting in a monsoon rain for a few weeks, etc., that it'll jam. That clip can jam on you. He immediately goes, Red immediately tells us, here, move. He takes our magazines and ejects 2 rounds out of every magazine. And then he tells us, what do you got that you want to keep dry? And of course, I had this little plastic thing with a bunch of pictures of girls from St. Pete High that I wanted to keep dry, and my little Gideon Bible. And he goes, yeah, the only place you're going to keep it dry is your helmet liner. So your steel pot, it is a steel pot, but inside it is the helmet liner. And so you've got to put the stuff between the steel pot and the helmet liner. And that's the only place that has any chance of staying dry. And even that, when you go through a river, you never know. But things like that, halazone, putting halazone in your canteens. If you didn't do that, you were going to get malaria. You were going to catch all kinds of worms, which I did. I caught, first time I got wounded, or maybe it was the second time, they sent me down to Cam Bay Air Force Hospital because Da Nang was filled up with wounded Marines. I get to Cam Bay and they started doing tests on me, and I still got my old medical records. I had this list of worms. I had so many worms inside me, and I lost 40 pounds at that point from just being in the jungle and getting eaten up inside by worms. And so, yeah, and there were times you'd fill up your canteen in a mountain stream or something, and then you'd go on upstream and you'd find 3 or 4 dead NVA laying in the stream. So you've been drinking water that some Marines have ambushed some NVA up here, and their bodies laying in the stream, and you've been drinking that water. So it's no wonder we had all these worms in us. But Red tried it, and salt tablets. If you didn't take salt tablets, the heat was so intense, you'd pass out. And you're humping all day, you're marching up and down mountains all day, you're setting up ambushes all night. Uh, Rarely did you get more than a 2 or 3 hours sleep. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty rough ride.
very. And to think of you carrying all that weight. Now, tell us just about the Tet Offensive, which you were in.
The Tet was 1968. That's when Tet hit in January 1968, New Year's. And I got there at the end of the Battle of Way City. So I missed the beginning of Tet. But Tet kept going. It was the whole year of 68 that Tet was going. We killed divisions. There were the NVA lost, he took huge numbers of killed in action, and they were decimated. And a lot of the American people weren't being told this. Of course, we didn't know that. I didn't know that. But when I got home, I realized it. And of course, all non-vets know it now. The media they would tell how many Marines were killed that week, or how many soldiers had died, or this or that. But they weren't given accurate counts, I don't think, of what we were doing to them. And the truth was, we were killing these guys at 10-1. It could have been more than that. And at the end of the Tet Offensive, General Giap, who was commanding general of the North Vietnamese army, they were beaten. They were ready to surrender at the end of the Tet Offensive. And he wrote this himself. They were beaten. They'd lost, I forgot the numbers, but we're talking so many guys, they couldn't be replaced. And everybody thinks, oh, they had so many guys they could replace them. They lost so many troops. They couldn't replace these guys. And the Viet Cong, they were all but wiped out. They were wiped out. They were never much of a factor after the Tet Offensive. They were used up. And so we murdered these guys in combat and in battles, but we took casualties. Of course, it's a war. So we took casualties, and we did all this without ever being able to go on the offensive. That galled a lot of the Marines. It galled everybody that I knew anyway. And here's this imaginary line, and you're not allowed to cross it, but they can be on the other side of this Ben Ho River or whatever it was. And forgive me, I've forgotten the name of that. But anyway, they had huge artillery pieces set up on the other side of this river, and they could just lob arty rounds over like into places like Cantien. And they could run back across that river when they were getting their butts kicked, which they did. If we could have pursued them and just finished them off, I think most historians believe, had we invaded North Vietnam at the Tet Offensive when they were so decimated, or even before, if we could have walked into North Vietnam. I know the fear is China would have become involved. I think a lot of people don't know the history between China and Vietnam. The Vietnamese hate the Chinese more than they hated us. And I don't know if the Vietnamese would have let the Chinese come in to help them. I really don't. A lot of people think they wouldn't have, because they could have never gotten the Chinese out. And you can see this just by, they've had two recent flare-ups between China and Vietnam not that long ago. And in one, 10,000 Chinese troops killed. So we're not talking about little shootouts. They've had a couple of major clashes, but they hated each other. They hated each other back then. And so the Russians were helping them, of course, but the Russians were going to come to Vietnam. Anyway, I think that war could have been ended quickly had we invaded. I really do. And I think I proved my point by this. All Nixon had to do was say, okay, this is all. 12 days, rolling thunder, 12 days of B-52 strikes. And the North Vietnamese and Ho Chi Minh, they came to the peace table in France on our terms. Now, everybody says we lost that war, these people teaching so-called history now. But the truth is this, we brought them to their knees. They came to the peace table in Paris on our terms. They signed the peace agreement. We signed the peace agreement. The war was over. We pulled the American troops out. 3 years later, they invade and beat the South Vietnamese. But the American military wasn't there. And I know school teachers who don't even understand, don't even know that. They know so little about history, and there they are teaching history. And it's a little scary and it's irritating. It's one of those irritating things.
It definitely is. That's why I think your book it's a really important book. I think people should get it. Guns Up is a book that is so readable, and the fact that you did take bad language out means everybody can read it. Sometimes they say women won't read a book if it's got bad language in it, but this is an important book, and there's a reason that it's been in print for over 40 years. It's a great book. I can't talk about all of your books today, but I'm going to have you back because you've written also some non-military books, books of faith that I want to talk to you about. A few of the other books that you've written: Gunner's Glory, No Better
That's
Way
not,
to Die.
yeah,
And
Gunner's Glory is nonfiction. The others are No Better Way to Die is fiction, but it's based on a Marine that I know and or knew. And Section 8 is a comedy. Uh,
it is a
and there's,
comedy.
yeah,
It is a wonderful comedy. It is so funny that
thank
as
you.
on the radio
I
program,
love it. I
I
love that comedy.
it's hilarious, and I have something to show you because as in the control room in Big Ed, he taped a very special promo for that book, and we love it. And here I want to play it for you. Okay?
Okay.
From the author of gut-wrenching novels Guns Up and Gunner's Glory, now a gut-wrenching comedy, Section 8. One fan writes, Section 8 is inspired insanity. Johnnie Clark should receive the Pulitzer Prize and his commitment papers in the same ceremony. You will laugh till it hurts. Section 8. It's 1946, and President Harry Truman has two goals in life: dump the U.S. Marine Corps and get reelected. Can he convince Congress that the Marine Corps is obsolete? He'll try, but first he wants to use them one last time. There's something he needs them to do, a little mission to China to steal something that one of his contributors need. It's dangerous, but who cares? Marines are expendable, or so he thinks. What could possibly go wrong? A lawsuit by the Vatican? An attempted assassination by a dead assassin? Flamethrower sermons? If that's not enough, there's a missing A-bomb. This book has it all, even a love story. Remember, Section 8 is only a temporary state, you hope, written by a true American hero. You'll love this book, now available on Amazon. So get it today. Section 8 by Johnnie Clark. Semper Fi.
Hey, I really love that. I love that. Thank the guy who put that together.
Big Ed, his voice is great, and we play that promo for you. We play that all the time. We
I,
love it,
I
and
love it.
it's really a fun read. And when you think about it, Harry Truman was serious. He really wanted to
Oh,
get
yeah.
rid of the Marines. He was crazy.
No, he really did. I know. The book is fiction, of course, but honestly, it's based on old China hands, Marines that I got to know personally and are friends with, became close friends with. And they would tell me their stories. And that's a lot of the insanity in Section 8 is based on things that really happened. But one of the things was Harry Truman. The exact reason is always, I heard that he was an old doughboy in World War One, and he held a grudge against the Marine Corps because after the Battle of Belleau Wood, see, nobody had been able to take Belleau Wood through the World War One, and the Marines were thrown into it and took it in 24 hours, but hand-to-hand combat. And what they did was just remarkable. And so the French government and all of America made a pretty big deal out of it, and they got a lot of press. And the French government gave the French Forward Air, that pokey rope I was telling you about, to the 5th Marine Regiment and on. Harry Truman just hated the Marine Corps. He thought they got too much publicity. And he was convinced the Army, we didn't need a Marine Corps. The Army could do anything the Marines could do. And so there might have been other reasons he wanted to get rid of them, but we think a lot of old Marines thought that was one of them. And it was so serious and so real that the Marines were cut down to one division and not even a full division. And these old Marines would tell me they'd go to the chow hall and there wouldn't be any chow in the chow hall. And you know how the Marines are about a uniform. It's got to be perfect. And so there weren't any uniforms for a lot of the guys. Everything was being slashed from Marine Corps budget. And Red Mike Edson, who was the hero of Edson's Raiders on Guadalcanal, and he actually left the Marine Corps, retired from the Marine Corps, just so he could fight Harry Truman in Congress to fight and try to save the Marine Corps. And they finally saved the Marine Corps, but the way they did it was by saying, we can put a Marine in the field for a third the cost of putting a soldier in the field, and we can put a better combat man in. And as it ended up, PatZi, when during the Korean War, our Army, look, I don't rag on the Army all the time. I know they've got some great outfits, some great units. But at the end of World War II, the Army was just an occupation army in Japan. And they, for a private's pay, you get everything, including a geisha girl. They were living high on the hog, but they were falsifying their combat readiness reports. A lot of those kids that were thrown into Korea at the beginning didn't even know how to use their weapons, the 2.5 rocket launchers against Russian tanks. They didn't even know how to do it. And they were totally unprepared. Like a battalion of U.S. soldiers were thrown in and were massacred. And it wasn't funny. They were just massacred. And until the only combat ready troops we had were the 5th Marine Regiment, which was they called them a brigade in Korea. But the 5th Marine Brigade, MacArthur, when the Koreans had gone all the way to the Pusan River perimeter and we were about to lose the Korean War, he called in the Marines. And it was the first time the North Korean Army got beat. They were stopped. Then he pulled them out and made the famous Incheon landing and turned the whole war around. But if we hadn't had that one little group of Marines, that one division that hadn't been gotten rid of yet, we would have lost the Korean War. But the Korean War saved the Marine Corps, because then they couldn't get rid of us.
Thank goodness, because as I told you when you were in the studio with me, twice my life was saved by Marines. I was working and living overseas, and I sometimes got in some dangerous spots, and twice it was a Marine who one I wish I knew who he was, because he just, it was like, I love when you say a Marine likes their uniform just right. And this guy, I saw him standing there, and he was, to me, he was like a god. He was like perfect. Every crease, everything was perfect. Absolutely perfect. But boy, when he had to jump into action, he did it. Afterwards, I thought, oh, he's got to go and change his uniform.
That's great. Yeah.
I do these special things, particularly for you, because for a Marine, it's always, for me, you guys come first.
Thanks, PatZi. Yeah. Once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine.
You're always a Marine, and you're always special. Johnnie Clark,
hey, thanks for having me on.
Hero, an overachiever. He just had to get those 3 Purple Hearts, but we must remember that you got the Silver Star. That's the important one.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, it's been a joy to talk to you, and I'll have you back again soon. Okay,
thanks, PatZi.
Oh, anytime. Love ya. Semper Fi.
Love you. Semper Fi.